The national leader, Ibrahim Traoré, often sat in his office late into the night, studying files and reports with meticulous attention. The weight of his nation rested upon his shoulders, and he took his responsibility with the gravity it deserved. The walls of his modest office were lined with maps, strategic documents, and photographs of his beloved country, a land he had sworn to protect with his very life. On one particular evening, as the city slept and darkness cloaked the streets outside, Ibrahim received a highly classified intelligence report that made his heart pound with alarm. The thick manila envelope had been hand-delivered by his most trusted intelligence officer, a man who had served alongside him for decades. As Ibrahim broke the seal and began reading, his face grew increasingly grave with each passing line. The report contained devastating information. The nation's enemies were not merely beyond the borders, as previously believed. They had infiltrated deep within the country itself, embedding themselves like parasites in the body of the nation. These enemies had disguised themselves as ordinary citizens, merchants, and even respectable members of society. They were operating in various cities and towns, systematically hollowing out the foundations of the country from within. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. As Ibrahim continued reading, his hands trembling slightly, he discovered that these internal enemies were receiving assistance from within the government itself. Certain individuals, people who appeared honorable and respected on the surface, were secretly aiding these traitors. These collaborators held positions of influence and trust, which made them all the more dangerous. Ibrahim read the report multiple times, his military training compelling him to absorb every detail. The document identified specific locations where suspicious activities were taking place: upscale neighborhoods, luxurious mansions, and several warehouses on the outskirts of the city. These were the places where weapons and narcotics were being hidden, stockpiled for a future assault that would plunge the nation into chaos and disorder. The intelligence was clear and damning. Large shipments of illegal arms were being smuggled into these locations under the cover of darkness. Alongside the weapons, massive quantities of drugs were being stored, substances designed to poison the youth of the nation, to destroy the next generation from within. The strategy was diabolical in its comprehensiveness: physical destruction through violence and spiritual destruction through addiction. Ibrahim Traoré knew that if he simply handed this case over to his subordinate officers, there was a significant risk that evidence would be destroyed, or that the traitors within his own ranks would tip off the enemy. This was no ordinary investigation requiring routine procedures. This was about the very survival of the nation, its future, and the lives of millions of innocent citizens who trusted their government to protect them. He understood that the true duty of a leader was not merely to give speeches from podiums or issue commands from the safety of an office. Real leadership meant being willing to risk one's own life to save the nation. A wave of patriotic fervor surged through his heart, that deep, visceral love of country that defined his very existence. Ibrahim made a decision that would change everything. He would handle this matter personally with his own hands and eyes. He would expose the enemy face to face and bring them to justice. He would step down from his ceremonial position and enter the field of action himself. The resolve crystallized in his mind like steel. Even if he had to sacrifice his own life in the process, he would not retreat or compromise. That night, Ibrahim walked to the window of his office and peered out into the darkness. The streets below were silent and empty, bathed in the pale glow of streetlights. He knew that this silence could be the calm before a devastating storm. But there was a sense of peace in his heart because he was certain of one thing: he was on the path of truth and justice, and no force on earth could deter him from that righteous course. He whispered softly to himself, his breath fogging the cold glass. "Let us see how these enemies dream of destroying my country. I will shatter their dreams before they can become reality. I will be the shield that stands between them and my people." When Ibrahim Traoré conducted a thorough analysis of the intelligence report, he immediately began implementing the first phase of his operation. He carefully selected a small group of absolutely trustworthy individuals to monitor the identified locations. These were men he had known since childhood, warriors who had proven their loyalty through years of service. He knew they were not only honest and capable, but would not hesitate to lay down their lives for the mission. Ibrahim gathered him in a secure room deep within the government complex, a space swept daily for surveillance devices. The men sat around a heavy wooden table, their faces illuminated by a single lamp that cast long shadows across the walls. Ibrahim looked at each of them in turn before speaking. "Keep your eyes open at all times," he instructed, his voice low and commanding. "Do not dismiss any unusual activity as ordinary. Watch every sound, every movement, every gesture, every action. These enemies advance their plans through the smallest of signals. They are patient and clever, which makes them extremely dangerous." The young men nodded solemnly, understanding the weight of their assignment. They had been chosen because Ibrahim could trust them with his life, and more importantly, with the life of the nation. Each man received specific instructions, designated areas to surveil, and secure communication protocols that would allow them to report their findings without detection. Following their commander's orders, the operatives began covert surveillance in various upscale areas of the city. They adopted different covers. Some posed as street vendors, others as maintenance workers or delivery drivers. They blended seamlessly into the urban landscape, becoming invisible observers of the hidden criminal network. Within a few days, Ibrahim received a significant report. One of his men had observed unusual activity at a large, ostentatious mansion in the wealthy district of the city. During the night, several vehicles would arrive at the property, vehicles that would mysteriously disappear before daybreak. The drivers of these vehicles were not ordinary civilians, but appeared to be highly trained bodyguards with military bearing. The reports indicated that these vehicles carried large wooden crates and sealed containers that were quickly moved inside the mansion, after which the doors would be immediately locked. The operation was conducted with military precision, suggesting professional organization and significant resources. After more thorough investigation, it was revealed that this mansion belonged to a man named Saif Ali, a notorious yet outwardly respectable figure in the nation's business community. Saif Ali had spent years cultivating an image as a successful entrepreneur and philanthropist. He owned large factories, employed hundreds of workers, and regularly donated to charitable causes. His face appeared frequently in newspapers and on television, always smiling, always the picture of civic responsibility. But now the mask was beginning to slip. The truth was that a substantial portion of his wealth came from smuggling illegal weapons and narcotics. These weapons were being supplied to enemies of the state, while the drugs were being distributed throughout the country to destroy the younger generation and create social instability that would allow criminal elements to flourish. Ibrahim received even more disturbing news. Saif Ali was not working alone. Behind him stood a network of powerful politicians, high-ranking government officials, and influential international businessmen. These were individuals who publicly advocated for national progress and peace, who gave eloquent speeches about patriotism and development. But behind closed doors, they were actively working to undermine the very nation they claimed to serve. These conspirators possessed such power that if official government action were taken through normal channels, the evidence would be destroyed, witnesses would disappear, and the entire operation would fail. Confiscated weapons would mysteriously vanish from evidence lockers, documents would be shredded, and those responsible would remain free to continue their work. Therefore, Ibrahim Traoré made the fateful decision to enter the field himself. But this time, he would not go as a national leader with authority and protection. Instead, he would go as an ordinary man, using unconventional methods to gather irrefutable evidence against the saboteurs. He wanted to ensure that when Saif Ali and his associates were finally arrested, the world would see undeniable proof that these people were enemies of the state, not innocent citizens being persecuted by an authoritarian government. Several more days passed as the surveillance continued. One of Ibrahim's informants reported that renovation work was currently underway at the mansion. Changes were being made to the interior structure, and various workers and craftsmen were coming and going regularly. The informant added a crucial detail. They were specifically looking for a skilled carpenter to complete some of the woodwork. When Ibrahim heard this information, a brilliant plan formed in his mind. If he could disguise himself as a carpenter and gain entry to the mansion, no one would suspect him, and he would have the opportunity to observe the internal operations firsthand. It was a gamble, certainly, but a calculated one based on his military training in infiltration and reconnaissance. Ibrahim knew that if this opportunity was missed, another such easy access point might never present itself again. He immediately called his closest associates to a secure meeting and explained his plan. They were stunned into silence. Their national leader, the man who commanded the military and represented the nation on the world stage, was proposing to disguise himself as a common laborer and infiltrate an enemy stronghold. But this was precisely what made Ibrahim who he was, a leader who would personally face danger for his people rather than send others into harm's way while he remained safe. Late that night, Ibrahim meticulously planned every detail of the operation. He decided to carry small covert surveillance devices, a camera disguised as a button on his shirt, and a recording device that could capture audio conversations. Outside the mansion, his trusted companions would remain ready to provide backup assistance in case of emergency. At that moment, Ibrahim said to himself with determination, "This war is not fought only with guns. Sometimes a wooden hammer and saw can expose the enemy just as effectively as a battalion of soldiers. Tomorrow, I become a carpenter, and in that role I will cut down the roots of my nation's enemies." Ibrahim's eyes gleamed with resolve. The plan was complete and comprehensive. The morning sun would herald the beginning of a new chapter, the moment when a national leader would enter an enemy stronghold disguised as a humble craftsman. The next morning, Ibrahim Traoré made the decision to adopt a disguise that would alter the course of the coming days. He knew that stepping into the enemy's den would not be easy, but his intentions were pure, and his heart was resolute. Sitting in his private chambers, he studied himself carefully in the mirror. He was a national leader, a military commander, recognized by millions of people. But today, he had to forget all of that and assume the appearance of an ordinary carpenter. It was a transformation that required not just physical changes, but a complete shift in bearing and behavior. First, he trimmed his distinguished military beard, leaving only a light mustache that changed the entire shape of his face. Then came the matter of clothing. He retrieved simple, worn garments that looked exactly like those of a manual laborer, faded work pants with patches on the knees, a plain cotton shirt with frayed cuffs and scuffed work boots. He placed an old cap on his head and created artificial burn marks on his hands to simulate the scars that would naturally accumulate from years of working with wood and tools. His clothes were deliberately smudged with dust and sawdust to make it appear that he had come directly from a workshop. But the real cleverness lay in the covert technology he employed. Ibrahim removed one of the buttons from his shirt and replaced it with a tiny camera so small that the human eye could barely detect it. This camera would transmit images in real time to his close associates monitoring from outside. Additionally, he placed a small recording device in his pocket that would capture audio conversations. All these arrangements served a single purpose: to gather evidence and bring the enemy's plans into the light of day for the entire world to see. The evidence would be irrefutable, documented in multiple formats, impossible to dismiss or deny. Ibrahim called his few trusted and reliable companions to give them final instructions. These were men who had served with him for decades, who had proven themselves in countless dangerous situations. They gathered in the secure room once more, and Ibrahim addressed them with the gravity the situation demanded. "I will go inside," he said, his voice steady and calm. "All of you will remain outside, maintaining a perimeter. If you observe any unusual activity, respond immediately, but wait for my signal. This mission is larger than any individual, including myself. Therefore, patience and composure are essential. Do not act rashly, no matter what you see or hear, unless I give the code that indicates I am in immediate danger." His companions acknowledged the orders, though their faces showed concern for their leader's safety. They knew the risks involved, but also trusted Ibrahim's judgment and capabilities completely. Ibrahim placed a saw, hammer, and other tools in a bag, completing his transformation into an ordinary craftsman. As he prepared to leave, he took one final look in the mirror. The man staring back at him was unrecognizable as the national leader. He was simply another working man trying to earn his daily bread. When he approached Saif Ali's mansion, he immediately noticed the heavy security presence. 2 armed guards stood outside the gate, their eyes scrutinizing every person who approached with deep suspicion. These were not ordinary security personnel, but professionally trained operatives with military backgrounds, evident in their posture and alertness. As Ibrahim moved forward, one of the guards raised his hand to stop him and demanded, "Who are you? What business do you have here?" Ibrahim responded in a calm, humble tone that matched his disguise. "I was called here. I am a carpenter. My name is Rahmat. I received word that skilled woodwork was needed inside. I have been hired for the job." The guard examined him carefully from head to toe, his gaze lingering on Ibrahim's face for several uncomfortable seconds as if trying to place him. The atmosphere grew tense. A second guard approached and asked in a harsh voice, "Who called you? Give us a name." Ibrahim immediately provided the name of a local craftsman who frequently worked in upscale areas, a detail his intelligence team had supplied. His manner was so confident and natural that the guards exchanged uncertain glances with each other. Finally, one guard said in a condescending tone, "Fine, but we'll be watching you. Any wrong move and you'll face immediate consequences." Ibrahim bowed his head respectfully and replied, "Sir, I only know how to work with wood. I know nothing else and have no interest in anything beyond my craft." The guards took one more long, suspicious look before finally opening the gate. As Ibrahim stepped through the threshold into the enemy's territory, he took a deep breath. His heart was pounding rapidly, but he maintained a mask of complete calm on his face. He knew the first hurdle had been successfully cleared, but the real challenge still lay ahead. As he walked toward the main house where workers were being directed, only one thought echoed in his mind. Now I must reach into the very heart of the enemy and see everything that no one else has witnessed. As soon as Ibrahim Traoré entered the mansion, the first shock came from the atmosphere itself. A strange smell permeated every corner, a mixture of gunpowder and something toxic, like chemical compounds that shouldn't exist in a residential space. It wasn't a pleasant scent, but rather a silent warning that beneath the foundations of this house, some covert and illegal activity was certainly taking place. A servant who himself appeared suspicious led Ibrahim to the main hall for work. The man's demeanor was rigid and cold, his eyes containing a peculiar hardness that suggested he was far more than a simple domestic employee. Ibrahim followed, carrying his woodworking tools, but his eyes were constantly surveying his surroundings with the trained observation of a military operative. He noticed modern surveillance equipment disguised as decorative elements on the walls, their camera lenses barely visible. The carpets spread across the floor seemed to conceal heavy objects beneath them, possibly weapons or other contraband. Most significantly, the men wearing black suits and standing in various corners were clearly not ordinary servants but highly trained security operatives, their bearing and alertness marking them as former military or intelligence personnel. Ibrahim found a spot and began removing his tools, starting to work on a piece of wood. But his eyes kept wandering around the space, absorbing every detail. When one of the servants noticed him looking around with what might be interpreted as suspicious curiosity, the man spoke in a harsh tone. "Focus on your work, don't look around so much." It was a dangerous moment. If Ibrahim showed even the slightest nervousness, the suspicion would deepen and potentially blow his cover. But he immediately controlled the situation with practiced ease. Smiling, he replied cheerfully, "Brother, this is such a magnificent house. The woodwork is also of the highest quality. I was just thinking about where else one might see such craftsmanship. As a carpenter, I appreciate fine work when I see it." The servant softened slightly, grunted, and then moved toward another room. Ibrahim breathed a quiet sigh of relief, but internally he knew that every step was taking him closer to the edge of danger. Ibrahim recalled his military training. He had practiced hundreds of times in Special Forces school how to infiltrate enemy territory and assume the appearance of an ordinary person. His hands moved mechanically across the wood, planing and shaping, but his mind functioned like a sophisticated surveillance machine, analyzing everything. He studied the structural design of the ceiling, noting the directions of windows and doors, and mentally counted how many rooms existed and which ones saw the most traffic. For a moment, Ibrahim wondered if all his suspicions might prove unfounded, if perhaps there was no substantial evidence to find. But his instincts, honed through decades of military and intelligence work, told him otherwise. Something was definitely hidden in this house, something significant and dangerous. He was using not just his eyes but his intuition as a guide, trusting the subtle warnings his subconscious provided. While sitting in the main hall pretending to focus on his carpentry, Ibrahim felt the presence of someone important. He sensed that critical conversations were happening in the inner rooms, muffled voices discussing matters of grave importance. The sound of careful footsteps came periodically from the interior chambers, as if people were trying to hide something. Ibrahim placed his hammer down gently and turned his head slightly. though he maintained the appearance of being completely absorbed in measuring and marking the wood. This was the moment of his first test. He decided not to make any overt moves, yet only observation and patience. A mental map was forming in his mind, where guards were stationed, which room appeared most important, and from which corner a secret passage might emerge. The mansion was revealing its secrets slowly, and Ibrahim was cataloging every detail with the precision of a trained intelligence officer. The thought kept echoing in Ibrahim's heart. This is not just another mansion, this is a base for cutting the roots of the nation. I must expose its reality to the world at any cost, no matter what dangers I must face. While working in the hall, Ibrahim Traoré felt a strange sense of calm despite being surrounded by enemies. He knew that standing among adversaries was not without risk, but his courage and determination were strengthening him with every passing moment. The sound of his hammer striking wood blended into the ambient noise within the house. But during this time, he noticed that someone was repeatedly watching him with unusual interest. This person was the overseer who appeared to be in charge of all the servants and workers. He supervised everyone and issued commands in his harsh voice, maintaining strict discipline. Surprisingly, however, the overseer seemed impressed by Ibrahim's craftsmanship. When Ibrahim skillfully executed some delicate work on a piece of wood, the overseer approached and smiled, saying, "You have good skill in your hands. Such quality work is rarely seen these days." Ibrahim bowed his head humbly and replied simply, "This is just my means of earning bread, sir. I am grateful for the opportunity to practice my trade." As afternoon approached, the servants left one by one to eat their midday meal. The atmosphere in the mansion became quiet for a few precious moments. But Ibrahim decided to stay, using the excuse that he wanted to continue working through lunch. His heart told him that this moment was crucial, that secrets were revealed when everyone became careless and dropped their guards. Shortly after, he observed the mansion's owner, Saif Ali, moving with a few close associates toward the inner rooms. Their faces bore expressions of seriousness, and their steps moved with urgency. This was clearly no casual conversation, but a meeting of significant importance. Ibrahim set aside his saw and hammer and slowly followed behind them, though he didn't get too close. Instead, he positioned himself near a door, close enough to hear but far enough to avoid immediate detection. Muffled voices began to reach his ears from beyond the door. Ibrahim lowered his head, pressed his ear against the door, and held his breath to listen more carefully. His breathing seemed to stop when he heard someone inside say, "Everything is ready. Tonight will be a major explosion. The central part of the city will descend into chaos." Another voice responded, "This time the strike will be such that the government's foundation will shake. Weapons and explosive materials have already been delivered. We are just waiting for the final order." Ibrahim's blood ran cold. These were not just secretly spoken words, but evidence of a massive conspiracy that could devastate the entire nation. He immediately activated the covert recording device in his pocket, which began capturing every word, every sentence. Everything was being preserved as evidence. He realized that these people were not only planning explosions, but were also in contact with foreign enemies who sought to destabilize the nation. Someone inside continued, "By tomorrow, additional funding will arrive. This time, politicians are also with us. The common people won't even realize where all this originated. The blame will fall elsewhere, and we will remain hidden in plain sight." Ibrahim recorded everything silently, methodically. The picture was becoming crystal clear before his eyes. Saif Ali and his associates were not merely drug and weapons dealers. They were agents of the nation's enemies. Their goal was not just wealth, but the complete destruction of the entire national system, creating chaos that would allow hostile foreign powers to gain influence. At that very moment, he heard footsteps approaching from nearby. Ibrahim panicked for a split second, but quickly grabbed his tools and immediately began working on the wood again, his movements natural and unhurried. The door opened, but fortunately, someone walked past to another area without noticing him. Ibrahim took a deep breath of relief, but in his heart, he knew that the game had become extremely serious and dangerous. The enemy's conspiracy now stood exposed before him in horrifying detail. But this was merely the beginning of what he would uncover. He thought to himself, "Before this night's darkness falls, I need to learn more. This conspiracy exists not just in words. There is an entire system behind it, a network of traitors and foreign agents. I must find the physical evidence, the weapons, the money, the documents that will prove everything beyond any doubt. Ibrahim Traoré stood outside the door, head bowed, absorbing the impact of the conversation he had just overheard, when suddenly he heard footsteps approaching rapidly from nearby. His heart jumped, but he immediately returned to his tools and began planing wood as if he had been focused solely on his work the entire time. From the corner of his eye, he saw a servant emerge from the inner room with heavy, purposeful steps. In the man's hands was a strange wooden box that he carried with extreme caution, as if its contents were both valuable and dangerous. The box appeared ordinary at first glance, but Ibrahim's trained instincts told him that something important was concealed within it. The servant walked directly into the same room where, moments earlier, Saif Ali and his associates had been plotting. As the door closed behind him, Ibrahim's heart began racing with nervous anticipation. This was a decisive moment. If he let this opportunity slip away, this secret might remain hidden forever. He gathered his tools and moved with extremely cautious steps toward that room. The door was slightly ajar, a stroke of fortunate carelessness on someone's part. Ibrahim craned his neck to peer inside and saw that the room appeared to be a storage area filled with piles of lumber, pieces of old furniture, and dusty equipment scattered about in apparent disarray. However, Ibrahim's sharp eyes quickly discerned that all this material was merely camouflage, deliberately arranged to hide something more significant. The room had an odd feeling to it, an emptiness that suggested walls or floors concealing hidden spaces beneath. Ibrahim entered slowly and silently, taking his hammer and chisel in hand, moving various items around as if examining them for his carpentry work. His ears remained alert to the slightest sound from outside, ready to react instantly if someone approached. Suddenly, his gaze fell upon a section where the carpet seemed loose, with wooden floorboards beneath that didn't sit quite flush with the rest. He knelt down and pressed his hand against that section, feeling it shift slightly. A heavy creaking sound emerged as the wooden panels moved, revealing what they had been designed to conceal. Ibrahim applied more pressure, and a small hidden door became visible. This door had been concealed with such expertise that an ordinary eye would never have noticed it. The entrance bore a rusted latch that had clearly not been opened in some time, suggesting this passage was used only rarely and for the most sensitive operations. Using the handle of his saw for leverage, Ibrahim opened the latch. A staircase descending into darkness appeared before him, and from below came a cold draft mixed with the smell of gunpowder and chemicals, the unmistakable odor of weapons storage. His heartbeat accelerated dramatically, but his steps showed no hesitation. Ibrahim knew this was the place where the real secrets lay hidden, where the evidence he needed would be found. He activated his button camera to ensure that every scene would be recorded and pressed the device in his sleeve to signal his companions outside that the situation was becoming critical. Reciting a prayer under his breath for protection, he began descending the stairs slowly and carefully. The darkness was profound, penetrated only by faint light from above, but the lamp of his heart remained bright with determination. His footsteps echoed in the silence, as if the ground itself was hiding layers of secrets. Every moment, he felt that someone might come from above and catch him red-handed, but he didn't stop. His mission was too important to abandon now. Reaching the bottom, he found himself in a spacious basement. This was not merely storage, but a complete covert operations center. Moisture had accumulated on the walls, dust covered the floor, and large wooden crates were stacked in every corner. Ibrahim looked around in the dim light and whispered to himself, "This is the place where the game against the nation is being played. This is the heart of the conspiracy." He took out his small camera and began recording video of every corner, knowing that this evidence would be sufficient to bring the enemy before the bar of justice. But deep in his heart, he also knew that the full truth had not yet been completely revealed. There was more to discover, and he would not leave until he had found it all. When Ibrahim Traoré descended the covert staircase and stepped into the basement, he was immediately assaulted by an intense and poisonous smell. It was the combined odor of gunpowder and narcotics, so strong that breathing became difficult. He held a cloth over his nose and moved forward with extreme caution. Silence hung heavy in the air around him. Fortunately, no one was present in the basement at that moment, which gave him a golden opportunity to examine everything thoroughly without the immediate threat of discovery. The lighting was minimal. A single bulb in the corner provided dim illumination that cast strange, dancing shadows across the walls. Ibrahim moved forward step by step, his heart pounding with the knowledge that someone could arrive at any moment. But his courage remained steadfast. He knew that every scene captured here would serve as precious evidence for protecting the nation. A short distance ahead, large crates were arranged in neat rows, stacked systematically like inventory in a military warehouse. Ibrahim opened the lid of one crate, and his eyes widened with a mixture of shock and grim vindication. Inside lay modern weapons of sophisticated design. Rifles, automatic weapons, hand grenades, and other deadly armaments, all arranged with military precision. Seeing this, Ibrahim's heart grew heavy with the weight of betrayal. If these weapons were used against the nation, how many lives would be lost? How many families would be destroyed? How many innocent people would suffer? He immediately adjusted his button camera and recorded video of the entire scene. In the camera's light, the gleam of the weapons became even more pronounced, creating an eerie and damning visual record. The intelligence reports he had read days earlier came flooding back to his mind, reports that stated enemies within the nation were smuggling weapons to spread disorder and violence. Today, that reality stood before him in physical form, undeniable and horrifying. The scope of the conspiracy was even larger than he had initially imagined. But the story didn't end there. In another corner of the basement, Ibrahim noticed another room with its door partially open. He moved slowly toward it and pushed the door wider. Upon entering, another shocking scene confronted him. This room was filled with mountains of narcotics. Large sacks, boxes, and packages were stacked one upon another, containing heroin, cocaine, and other addictive substances. The quantities were staggering, enough to destroy an entire generation of young people. A fire of rage ignited in Ibrahim's heart. He knew this poison was intended for his nation's youth, the generation upon whom the country's future depended. The enemy was attacking not only with weapons, but also with narcotics, seeking to hollow out the nation from within by destroying its human capital. This was not merely business or criminal enterprise. It was a calculated strategy of national destruction, a form of warfare that targeted the very soul of society. Ibrahim took out his recording device and began capturing video of every box and sack, documenting the full scope of this criminal operation. Every scene represented irrefutable evidence that would be impossible to deny or dismiss. Ibrahim said to himself, "All of this must be shown to the world so that everyone knows who is selling this nation and who has traded their conscience for money and power." He proceeded to the far end of the room and inspected everything methodically, his military training guiding his documentation process. Footprints on the dusty floor indicated that many people visited this place regularly and that materials were constantly being moved in and out, a functioning distribution network. Ibrahim knew his time was limited. At any moment, someone could arrive and discover his presence. He quickly secured all the footage and photographs, ensuring multiple copies were transmitted to his team outside. As he prepared to leave, he took one final video recording and whispered to himself, "This is the root that has bled my nation dry. Now the time has come for this root to be pulled out forever. The evidence is irrefutable. Justice will be served." With his documentation complete, Ibrahim began his careful ascent back toward the surface, knowing that the most dangerous part of his mission, escape, still lay ahead.